All right, guys. So this video is the first video I'm kind of doing on my own for YouTube. Basically, what I want to talk about here is my own current understandings of how to use GPS in strength and conditioning. Um, Currently, I am using GPS with a couple teams where I'm working currently, and I've only really been exposed to GPS in the past year. So everything I know up to this point is because of a year of knowledge of looking into GPS, why we use it, how we can use it, and the importance of it, and the potential that it has going forward in this field. So this video is just kind of for my own sake, kind of get my thoughts out, um, speaking, and just see where my understanding develops, and I can look back at this video and compare what I know in the future to what I know now or current, like in the past. So that's what this is going to be about. A little bit about me. I have done a few internships, both in the private setting and in the college setting, different areas of the country. Currently, I'm at Springfield College. I am a second year strength and conditioning student, and I'm also a graduate assistant here, working with the men's lacrosse team, men's soccer team, men and women's tennis, and the track and field team. Of those teams, men's lacrosse and men's soccer are using GPS, so I have a decent amount of exposure when it comes to using this technology. Outside of that, I did my undergrad at Westfield State University. Did 3 years of track there. And yeah, it was a great experience knowing, being a student athlete, and obviously that helps going into strength and conditioning. But again, outside of that, I've been to a couple private sector places, and then I was at UMass and the University of Minnesota with Cal Dietz, working with him. So first things first, what is GPS? At least as I know it, it's just a method for external load monitoring. Again, it's just what we use right here. You can see the picture of it. We use the PlayerTech Catapult GPS unit. It's just something that the guys wear. They wear a little vest on their bodies, and the pod sits right in there. And then as they move around outside, the GPS will track how much they move, how far they move, how fast, all sorts of metrics that we can then use and analyze to help us in the decision-making process. Do we need to cut back on the training a little bit? Are the guys working too hard? Are they not working enough? We can look at, notes from the past season and see, okay, conditioning-wise or training-wise, we need to be at these points during different parts of the season, so on and so forth. And it gives us an idea of where our drills are at. Are certain drills that we thought were kind of easy actually hard on the athletes, or are the guys getting tired and we have no idea why? Well, let's look back at the data and see, all right, what drills did we do that day? Are they intense? Are they high volume? All sorts of things. So that's what GPS is for us. What GPS is not for us is the end all be all decision maker. Again, you might hear this a lot. It's a tool in the toolbox. Granted, it's a very important tool in the toolbox and it's cutting edge. But we need to remember that all the data that we collect needs to be put in the context of the sport. We can't just look at the data and make final decisions from there. Certainly, it can be a big part in the decision-making process, but we need to consider other factors outside of that. It's also not a way to determine, who's the best and who's not, who's got the highest numbers, who doesn't, and kind of rank players from there. At that point now we're just assuming objective data to subjective data. Not a good combination there. And then it's not something that only the performance coach has to understand. Everybody involved with the team needs to have some sort of understanding of what's happening with these GPS units. Granted, we are the ones that might know the most about it, and we make the final calls and analysis on what's happening with the data. But everybody needs to be involved in the conversation when it comes to this stuff. So how I'm using GPS currently. So with the men's soccer team and the men's lacrosse team that I work with here, we are in the second year of data collection. That means we've only had one full prior year with the GPS units on. So the name of the game right now is just collection. Keep gathering that data so that we can make more meaningful decisions going forward. and we can start making those comparisons season to season and start getting a great idea of, how are the drills looking. What are some trends that we're seeing amongst players at different positions, during different times of the seasons, stuff like that. And I also, communicate with the coaches, as much as they would want to hear about the data. Between the different teams I have here, one team uses the data a lot more, than say the other team. And what I mean by that is, the decisions that are made about, what players to, or what happens in the training is it takes a bigger role, with one team compared to the other. So it's just understanding and communicating with the coaches, like, hey, how much do you want to know about the data? What are you interested in looking at? Here's what I'm seeing, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, so far, the way I'm using it, the coaches are the final decision makers. But again, if they have questions, like, I'm always there to communicate with them and help them with that decision making process. We are also monitoring individuals in the team averages and addressing different levels of stress accordingly. When it comes to if they're still in the weight room during the season, I'll kind of monitor guys accordingly. If I can't get the coaches to kind of adjust what they're doing on the field with certain guys, I'll make that adjustment, or I'll give the guys extra recovery exercise or stuff like that, to kind of help combat any fatigue that I might see accumulating with the data. And then education, right? So this is a brand new technology for us. I mean, we're only in the second year at the most with this. Some teams that other coaches are working with, this is the first year that they've been using it. And part of this is educating myself, right? Because I've only been exposed to this for a year. A lot of the coaches here, they've only been exposed to it for a year. So it's a big part on me to get the full understanding of what's happening here, so that I can now go to the coaches with the answers. I can go to athletes, with the answers to help them understand, okay, what are these numbers looking at? What does this number mean? Is the training, I hear it's a lot, is the training good? Is the training bad? Is it hard? Is it easy? So helping everybody understand, in the simplest terms, what we are doing is going to help, use this data to influence our decision-making processes. Our way of collecting data. So, with the Player Tech Catapult GPS units, the software that we use is it's good when it comes to uploading the data. When it comes to analyzing the data, it doesn't really give us the full picture that we may want, which is totally fine, right? Because now, all we have to do is just create different dashboards, right? Everybody's got dashboards for something. It could be vertical jump testing, tracking lifts, so on and so forth. These dashboards here that we're looking at, first of all, I'll give credit to Mikey Blazowski and Andre Carrera. The ones that develop these dashboards, and I have kind of taken this information, from the men's soccer and men's lacrosse teams, the work that they did to, input the data. Tyler Stasiowski, he's the one that implemented the data for men's lacrosse. Andre with men's soccer. It gives us a bigger picture of what's going on. We're allowed to look at the numbers in one page, as you can see here. And we look at different things based off of this, right? You can see going across, like, we have our weekly averages. What are the practices looking like? Where are the games looking like, for both the team and the individuals, right? So if we're looking at certain individuals and trying to flag certain players, now we can also look at that. Again, it's a very customizable thing that we can use. And then we do it on Google Sheets, so we're able to share it with the coaches, and they can see it in live time as we input the data. Like, all right, how did this practice go? How did this game go? Obviously, it takes a lot more work compared to the more expensive softwares. But yeah, it's a learning process for all of us when it comes to this. We get to develop and customize the dashboards the way we want them. The way we analyze the data too, it's just very simple to look at, right? Using colors, using bar graphs, using charts and numbers, to kind of simplify everything, so the coaches can just quickly look at it and be like, okay, this was high, low, or medium, so on and so forth. So when it comes to analyzing the data, obviously the first things that we got to do is, all right, what metrics are we going to look at? With Catapult, you can look at many metrics at the same time, but that's not really, helping us to look at everything at once, right? We need to pick a few key metrics, usually three, four, or five, um, to help simplify this whole decision making process, right? Certain metrics, there's always arguments on which ones to track. I've seen it, when I've been looking up, what metrics are, best to track. Every coach has got their opinions. Everybody can make an argument for something. Really, to me, what I've kind of learned when it comes to picking metrics, just do something that makes the most sense for you, right? Um, if you compare two sports like soccer and football, right? Well, soccer is a very running dominant sport. So, and football is a very, there's running involved, but there's a lot more contact, right? So, looking at metrics like impact makes a lot more sense for football because they're getting hit all the time. And we need to kind of keep track of that, right? And make sure guys aren't, experiencing more hits than usual. But for soccer, I don't really need to look at impacts. Soccer players, I mean, if you look at it, they might get, 5 to 10 impacts per week. Guys in the football, they might get that within a few minutes. So, do what makes sense for you, and then on that same view, I mean, you need to take in consideration, um, just keep in consideration the demands of the sport. Again, soccer is very running dominant, so I might want to look at total distance ran, um, overall, whereas a sport that, maybe like men's lacrosse, I'm going to look at distance as well, but I'm also going to take player load in consideration when it comes to tracking volume, right? Because now there's a lot more, there's also impacts in that game. There's a lot more change of direction than soccer might see, just because, of the level of the playing field and how intense it gets on the field compared to soccer. So again, just pick something that makes sense. You're going to want a volume metric, you're going to want an intensity metric. Um, that way, we can tell, like, okay, yes, we have a lot of volume, but how quickly was that volume accumulated and how intense was the work actually? So when it goes to um, differentiating your different drills, right? Now you can look at, okay, this was an intense drill, but the volume wasn't really there, and vice versa. And then another thing we look at too when it comes to metrics is acute to chronic ratios. Again, there's a lot of arguments about this. There's some research saying acute to chronic can predict injury. There's also research supporting that it doesn't predict injury. At the end of the day, it's another number that you got to take in consideration and put in the context, right? I still think there's value to the acute to chronic, even if it's not for predicting injury. I think it can tell us, especially during preseason stuff, are we progressing the load accordingly to prepare the guys for the season, or are we not doing enough? Or are we right in that sweet spot? That's what acute to chronic to me. That's where it's valuable. And then also just, when it comes to return to play, making sure the guys are being progressed properly there as well. So the way we use GPS in our decision making, I've already said decision making process a lot during this presentation here. But again, that's what technology is, right? It's to make our decision making systems more efficient. So the way I currently use it in the decision making process is it's a conversation starter, right? So again, to the coaches that are open to it, and even players that have questions, I can, if they have questions like, okay, like how hard did I work? How much did I do today? It's a good conversation starter to kind of slowly educate the players on, okay, during this practice, you did this, this, and this during this drill. So that led to these numbers being high or these numbers being low, so on and so forth. Same with the coaches and that. Practice planning. So we do have dashboards that track all the drills that we do and puts all the averages together to tell us, okay, with this drill, we can expect this much volume, this much intensity. And now that allows, with that dashboard, allows us to give it to the coaches and they can pick their drills and do it for maybe say they want to do it for 8 minutes. Okay, we can expect this much volume and this much intensity. That way we can control how much we're doing that day and plan accordingly. Um, and then on my end, I want to provide actionable strategies to adjust the loads, right? I don't want to just, tell the coaches, okay, coach, this day was too high. Let's cut back a little bit. Like, that's just not enough. I need to be able to tell them, okay, this drill, you kind of, you went too long, or you kind of switched something up that caused this to happen. This intensity went up, so on and so forth. I got to be able to tell them, okay, how can we adjust that drill to make it a little bit less intense, less volume, or more intense, more volume, so on and so forth. And then return to play. So, working with the ATs, we still put the GPS on the injured guys. If they're looking to, they're cleared for running, well, I want to make sure that they're hitting enough sprints, that they're hitting enough volume before we put them back out on the field, and they just get right into it. At least there we can have a little bit of progression going back into return to play process. That way, they're good to go to be back on the field, with all the different stimuli and such. And then, it allows us to track the stress applied during the training. If you look at the weekly load, did we hit enough volume that day? Did we not hit enough? Why do we look tired? Stuff like that. We can address the stressors that way. And the biggest thing for me with all this is you need to have a seat at the table, right? It's not enough to just be the guy that's collecting data. It's not enough to be, the guy just saying, okay, like you were low this day, coach. Let's fix that. You need to be the guy that, has the answers. You need to be prepared. You need to be prepared. Like if the coach were to come up to you and say, okay, plan a practice for me, you need to be ready to do so. You need to know the drills. You need to understand the sport. You need to understand what's causing something to be more intense, more, have more volume and such. And you need to be the one that, understands what the coach wants, what the athletes want, and that, So while it might not be our job to be the sport coach, you need to be prepared with those types of answers so that you can be in those conversations. You can start implementing this technology, and, you can overall help, enhance the performance of your athletes and make sure that they're not doing too much or too little. Some other ways of seeing GPS implemented outside of what I am doing currently. So we talk about tactical periodization a lot. Currently, with men's soccer, we kind of do this already. We are looking at making drills in certain days. Like we try to emphasize certain aspects of their physicality during days. So one day might be our speed day, where it's a little less volume and more high speed running. Usually that's like a couple days out from our game, in order to kind of prepare them for the stress they might see during the game. Or there might be a high volume day to kind of work on our endurance, work on our fitness, and stuff like that. And then it's tactical periodization comes in different forms, different ways, different methods. I've seen many coaches do it different ways. 2 days out might be the highest day, 3 days out might be the highest day. There may be no high days at all, and just let the games be the high days. So I've seen it done different ways. There's different arguments for everything. Again, you just got to do what makes sense for you and in the context of what you're doing as the performance coach. I've also seen it used in like many people have a red, yellow, and green system set up for a variety of different things. It could be readiness. It could be greens like our go day, it's our high day, so on and so forth. The most common way though I've seen it is separating the high, moderate, and low minute players. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but discussing the difference between minute and load. If you were to interchange the word minute with load here, you might see some different things. But looking at the high minute players, seeing if those guys are getting tired, looking at their data compared to the moderate minute players and the low minute players, and deciding what the practices need to look like for the moderate minute and the low minute players the next day, what it needs to look like for the high minute players. Do they need more recovery? Do the moderate minute players need a little bit more fitness, or are you going to risk doing too much? And then the low minute players, to get better team there, they need a little bit more fitness. It might be a fitness year. So implementing a practice that's a little bit more intense for them. I've also seen that in that way. And we kind of use this already, just not to the best extent that I think we could use it. And then I've also seen it, you talk about the HighLow model, right? This is coming from the 8-Vector Reverse Engineering a Sport book. They talk about the HighLow model, different emphasis of sports skills or performance skills that a player might need on different days. Matching up the GPS data or the training for that day on the field to match what we're doing in the weight room. Making sure the high days stay high, low days stay low, and then we can have those recovery days where we just give them full recovery and not mix any of the high and the lows. That way, that everything just kind of turns into this grayish middle area. Kind of get into my final thoughts here. What I know I don't know about GPS currently. We talk about using games as like the 100% marker, where all the practices for the week are relative to that 100%. So some days we're hitting 60% or we're hitting 40%. My understanding of you know using the game as a 100% marker. Well, what happens when certain metrics go over 100%? What does that mean? Is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? A lot of this has to do with putting stuff in the context, obviously. But what if one game was easier than the other? How does that 100% marker kind of be affected there? Do we only look at the highest game of the season, or do we treat every game as the relative point of where the rest of the training is happening? And how do we define like what 60% is? Like 60% of what? Are we talking about volume? Are we talking about intensity? Are we trying to wrap everything into one bundle? How do we do that? So that's one thing I'm trying to figure out going forward. What is my 60%? What is my 100%? Like what is the unit that we are calling 100%? And then, just learning about the varying methods of tactical periodization, like I talked about before. Everybody's got a different way of doing it. Everybody can make an argument for why their method works. Sometimes it makes sense to others. Sometimes it does. It's there's different ways to do everything. And that's just strength and conditioning in general, right? So, kind of learning about these different methods, and what fits best for our context is something that I'm always looking at. And then, like I just mentioned before, interchanging those high minute models with high load models and stuff like that. Do I want to look at how much a player played minute wise, or do I want to look at how much load they have accumulated from those games? Maybe a player played, high minutes, but maybe it was an easier game, and they might be a little low on their usual numbers. Do we need to implement some more stuff in training to keep them fresh? Or do we just look at minutes and say, hey, he played a lot of minutes, he must need some recovery, stuff like that. So just kind of playing with that balance of who played a lot, who didn't, was the game easy, was the game hard, kind of putting everything again in the context and understanding, okay, we need to adjust our training based off of either load, minutes, so on and so forth. And my final thoughts, GPS is a great tool. It's a very valuable tool, but it only does so much. Again, I'll say it for the 100th time here. We need to put everything in the context. It doesn't help. GPS only helps so much. If the athlete doesn't have the technical or tactical skills to complete their sport, then how much is the physical preparation really going to help? How much is pulling a player back if they're doing too much that week? Like, how much is that going to really help in the grand scheme of things? In reality, a lot of teams that use this, they might still be a losing team. But that's that. I mean, this is strength and conditioning in general, right? Like, we can only do so much to prepare them for the sport physically, but now it's on the rest of the performance staff to get those technical and tactical skills ready for the athletes to play at a high level. And I already kind of talked about putting the data in the context, but something I'll add to that is looking at other data points. Maybe it's not just GPS. GPS again is just tracking external loads. We also need to be aware of internal loads. Maybe you have some readiness scores. Maybe you're taking session RPE. All those things, and kind of helping put the GPS data in the context. And I also believe you need to be out there and understanding, like, okay, if they're practicing with the GPS on outside, I should probably be standing out there to understand, okay, like this is why the numbers were high. Like, I saw you guys do this and that. I saw the coach change the drill. Whereas if you're not there out at practice, kind of being involved with what's happening, then you're just kind of looking at numbers, not really understanding like why something may be different one day but kind of like the average the next day, so understanding where these numbers are coming from, I think is very important. And know what's what, be the person with the answers, have that seat at the table, be ready to discuss, what specifically the coach can do and what the athletes can do to make sure we're on track with um, the training. And again, like some coaches might not even be receptive to it, but at least be prepared with those answers so that maybe one day, when the coach asks you, you are ready with those answers. If you're not ready with those answers, you don't know what's going on, then that just the relationship between you, the coach, and the technology just decreases that much. Some coaches might give you full autonomy, some coaches might not. So just be prepared for all scenarios. And that's the best way we can make this successful. And then understanding where everybody is with this technology. So, educating everybody on what's going on, talking to everybody involved on the performance team, the athletic trainers, the sport coaches, um, maybe you have a data scientist, whatever it may be, the athletes, just, kind of tailor the information to fit those groups, right? So maybe with the athletic trainers, you're talking a little bit more return to play. Um, or maybe you do want to discuss acute to chronic, involving them with that conversation is important. Sport coaches, again, when it comes to talking about training practices, or who may need to cut back, that's very important. And then, a lot of athletes love numbers, they want to see their numbers. So, throwing them a bone every so often, with me, every week I'll send out who had the top speed and stuff like that. Um, but if guys want to know more about their data, I'll kind of sit down with them one-on-one, show them the numbers, and then educate them on what those numbers mean. I don't want to just send them their distance for that day and then think it wasn't not enough. And then, next thing you know, they're running around all the time to try to get their distance up, just educating them on what each number means and what we're trying to accomplish. I found that athletes are very receptive to that information. So that is it for the presentation. Again, this is just something that, I kind of want to get my thoughts out on video, kind of talk about it, and kind of help me organize what I know and what I don't know. Um, this is something new to me. So, first YouTube video where I'm talking. So, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. And I hope to put more content out like this in the future. And hopefully, my understanding of how all this GPS, can be used effectively, increases as I move forward um, in my experiences as a coach. So, thank you, and have a good day.